perspective.
Absolutely. I wanted to ask you a question about politics. Before I do that, though, I want to get your perspective on the 2 Live crew and Uncle Luke down in Florida, because he was about the same time around the era of Public Enemy, although very different in sound and music, but at the same time fighting the Supreme Court for the power to say what you want to say and speak how you want to speak on these records. What was your perspective on Uncle Luke and the 2 Live crew back then?
Well, when you're a female in hip hop, you're always surrounded by men. And so you're going to encounter 2 Live crew because you're surrounded by men, and they're going to be saying things that make you come aware of Luke and the 2 Live crew, even if you don't want to, because you're going to hear them going, pop that coochie, saying something crazy, you know. So it's like this. I think that, you know, adult entertainment has its place. And I believe in freedom of speech. I believe in that constitutional, you know, freedom. And because I believe in freedom of speech, I don't try to muffle or muzzle anybody else. But I also believe that if somebody comes through with anything that is going to mislead the community, they have a right to do it, but expect some pushback. Mm-hmm. Expect somebody to either highlight it, expose it, criticize it, you know, try to move it out of people's, you know, first state of mind and try to move people into another state of mind. But I love all of that. I love that, you know, somebody can put an idea out there and that you can fight against the idea that they put out there. I think it's a much better society than a society where you cannot express yourself.
Absolutely. Transition into politics, I wanted to ask you about that because hip hop has played a very influential role in politics the last, let's say, 20 years. Mm-hmm. And I believe you were one of the first people to speak out against the Clintons, because back then that was against the grain, or even a couple years ago, that was against the grain to do because of our beloved Bill Clinton back in the 90s, or so we thought at that time. And then we see what's going on today. We had the whole Trump effect. We see Biden, who was almost looked at as the savior for the Black community, but it's been more of the same no matter who sat in office for whatever reason. So I want to know what your thoughts are as we looked at the political, or we looked at the campaign that just passed, the current president as he stands now and the previous president.
I think more about our community than I think about the mainstream community. And I think if you don't have a plan and you aren't organized and you don't communicate with one another, you're always going to be chasing someone else's platform. It's the same like with technology, right? If we don't create our own platforms, if we don't advance and excel in technology, you're always going to have to rely on the big major platforms. So I think it's the same way in politics. Like, we normally show up late and then we are normally disappointed. We normally don't trust and very suspicious. And all of these things are justifiable. But what isn't justifiable at this point is us not having built institutions and independent parties and things that are solid and things that are properly funded and things that are properly organized to represent and protect our interests. So that's where I stand with all of that. I'm not a person who, sits around waiting to see who's going to be the next president and think that my future hangs on who's the next president. I would never even give one individual that much power. I think we would be much more effective if we could figure out who we are, what we believe, what we want, what we are willing to do, our work, our funds, our buildings, our institutions. I think that it's all past due.
Definitely. Can you take us back to 92 and the Los Angeles riots? We were very young at that time, me and my cousin here, so we don't remember a lot about it. Can you take us back to that time and what the country was like, what the atmosphere in the country was like at that time when that went down?
Atmosphere. Well, at that time, I was just a young organizer, a student organizer, and we were in a network of universities. So we would have student organizations in all of the universities across the campus, and that was the way that we communicated with each other. So I think at that time, the atmosphere was very tense, was very racially charged, was a lot of injustice, a lot of anger, um, a lot of feeling of powerlessness, and a lot of disrespect and a lot of disregard. And those were kind of the elements that made up the atmosphere. So it was a very, highly charged, highly energetic atmosphere. When I went from the East Coast, from living in Harlem, to visit the neighborhoods on the West Coast in LA, Nickerson Garden, Jordan Down, and all the different, areas, it was mind blowing to me because I came from the projects in the Bronx, and the projects have a certain particular look. But as soon as I landed in California, I felt like everybody in California was privileged just based on the trees, just based on the grass and, just the nature. I was like, and the sunshine and the seasons and the way, I was like, well, what are they mad at out here? Like, looks like paradise to me. So it took a whole education for me of going from hood to hood and attending some of the meetings that the young people were having, and even that the gangs were having to end the gang wars. These are things that I saw up close and personal, was in the same rooms with all of these people from these neighborhoods, and I learned a lot more than I knew before I landed on the West Coast. So it just made me more clear. And I'm a historian, so I love all of that. I love learning the history, the culture, the reason, the roots. Why is this going on? What can help it to stop? Who is moving the action? Who is holding everybody back? And I was a student of all of this at that time.
Right now, can I ask you a question about I heard your interview about 5 years ago